Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. You know how they say all things hidden at some point become revealed, and this is exactly what we're observing today. In last just couple of days, we got finally revelations on what's actually happening on the front line. I teased you for a while already, and if you watch some of my latest map updates, I mentioned that certain things were happening by the Ukrainians going on the offensive against the Russians, but I was not going in details because, well, Russians were not talking about it and Ukrainians were not talking about it. But then suddenly, the last couple of days, we just get absolutely hammered with news of Ukrainian successes on the front lines. So let's jump straight to the frontline update and I'll tell you everything that I know. So first thing that is being acknowledged is also mentioned by the deep state map creators is the Ukrainian attacks north of Kupiansk. We talked extensively about how Russia was able to reach Kupiansk from the north, where they sort of crossed that river that was over here, and that allowed them to approach the town from the north. After which Ukrainians, during the battles, were able first to undercut Russians around this area, preventing them to go further into the town, and now for Russians to get into the city of Kupiansk is very problematic. But now we also have confirmed reports of successful Ukrainian counteroffensive actions where they were able to liberate some of the territory, and most importantly, I can already say that they reached the river itself. So essentially what we're seeing right now is another of Ukrainian sort of undercutting attacks where if, and I'm saying this for now with if, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if Ukrainians will be able to liberate Dvorichna, that's it. That means all of the Russian dreams on sort of approaching Kupiansk from the north are sort of gone, because without the control on the western side of this river, there is no attack further south, and most likely this beachhead or bridgehead is going to get removed as well at some point. It's a massive victory for Ukraine, and it's very nice hearing that it is happening even despite the timing where Ukrainians are not the strongest. They are changing command right now, but we're going to touch upon it just a little bit later. Then moving southward, remember the area around Borova. This is where Russians were showing these fake maps to Putin and Ministry of Defense, where it was shown that basically not only Russians already reached Borova, that on some maps it was already shown that they took it completely. And we told you that, no, this is complete nonsense. Well, Ukrainians have had success also here. This little part of the salient was also supposedly cut off by Ukrainians, and now Ukrainians pushed Russians more back away from Borova and once again closer to the Luhansk, which is once again great news, seeing that even on the parts of the front line where Russians used to have dominance and Ukrainians didn't have the biggest force, they're now achieving success. But biggest thing, obviously, is Liman. Liman. Now, there have been a lot of speculations around Liman, where Deep State and myself as well, we kind of acknowledge that there are certain things happening, but no one really wanted to acknowledge just how bad it was for Russians. We now know how bad, and it is pretty bad. So for Russians right now, the situation is pretty dire, because what happened is Ukrainians were able to move through the Russian-controlled area just kind of to the west of Kolodezi and liberate also Katerinivka, Zelena Dolina. They pretty much are now isolating and cutting off parts of Russians. More importantly, this was already together with the attacks for the secondary encirclement. So what Ukrainians did here is what Russians have been trying to do basically all this time when fighting against Ukrainians. This is a classic tactic. So right now, Russians that are stationed at the most tip point of this salient, they are ultra screwed. And right now, there are like basically panic, realization, hopes, terror, all of these different emotions that Russian command and Russians themselves are experiencing being in this area. And you don't even need to listen to me because, I'm sharing you all of this information, but it's not actually me sharing it. It's the Russians themselves. This is a map from the pro-Russian absolute propaganda outlet called Rybar. And here you can see the same salient, and you can see that Rybar very clearly with the blue lines is showing, yep, Ukrainians have been cutting off. Ukrainians are pretty much now cut off Russian forces, and it is looking really, really, really bad. So Ukrainians on Liman direction are very close to, if not completely cut off this salient that I'll remind you took about 9 months for Russians to secure. So not only kind of push back the Russian progress some 9 months, but also if you note here, look at the bottom of the map. Look where the blue arrows are. Like we see the salient with the blue arrows. But if you look kind of downwards, you see, wait a second, that is already down from Liman. That is already closer to Dibrova. And this is the part where I couldn't really talk about beforehand. But yes, Ukrainians also are pushing in the southern direction. There have been successes in the area where we, for multiple map updates, were talking that Russians were supposed to capture, but they didn't capture. So now Ukrainians are having success in the area of Dibrova. This salient, this small one, is also under very big threat against Ukrainians. Ukrainians were able to almost reach Yampil, which is located right over here beforehand, but they just couldn't really complete this, and now they are doing it with additional successes. But more importantly, even in the area where Russians were having this success beforehand, this kind of like the magic triangle that I was talking about so much, and I was just saying that it's just a matter of time for Russians to clear it, we now have reports of Ukrainian counterattacks where they're actually liberating the territory, and not just with drones, but are actually Ukrainian units are being displayed in the areas that were beforehand just seeing Russian activities. So Ukrainians are pushing Russians even on their the most successful areas of the front line, which is obviously fantastic news. And if you're liking the successes of Ukrainian armed forces, remember that it's also thanks to you. Thank you so much for your support, but we're not done. We must continue supporting Ukrainian armed forces. Participate in the fundraiser for the Ukrainian armed forces so we see more good news of Ukrainians liberating their homeland and kicking the Russians out. Support the Ukrainian armed forces. But we are continuing. The only area where Russians are still having, I don't even know if I can call this success because it's already a failure. We established that if by the end of July Russia was not able to capture Kostantinivka, then it's a major, major failure. And it is. It truly is. But this is where Ukrainians yet to be able to stop and push back Russians. Let's put it like this. So here Russians have been continuing their offensive on the town of Kostantinivka. There are less and less Ukrainian positions being recognized inside of the town. Estimates are that, generally speaking, Ukraine could see this town being captured by the Russian by mid-September, end of September. That is kind of like neutral estimates, which is way, way, way too late for any kind of reasonable plans for Russians. But it is what it is. I mean, the remnants of this town, I'm saying it's town, but to be honest, it's been bombed to smithereens by the Russian aviation bombs. So there is not much things to go around there. We got also some more positive stuff around the Russian move towards Torske. If you remember, this is where I was looking at specifically for Russians that were able to kind of move northwards and reach the Ukrainian new Donbass line, one of the first modern line of defense of defenses that Ukrainians have built. And I was looking at whether or not Russians will be able to breach it right away. They weren't. It's a slog for Russians, and it turned into just another mass grave situation. There are some unconfirmed reports that some Ukrainian counterattacks were successful in liberating the town of Vilna, but it's a small tactical win. It might be going to Russians the next week, so it's positive, but like I'm not gonna say that it's like some kind of a big deal right over here. We got a little bit more information about the Ukrainian counteroffensive operations that were happening just southwest of Pokrovsk. This is where Ukrainians had major success. There is now already reports and debriefings all of this operation. Some of the operations are still ongoing in the area. However, I do want to underscore that this was Syrskyi's operation, once again, stating that all of the people saying that he is a bad commander is completely untrue. Like, you can judge him for what he's doing to the military, that he doesn't have the strategic vision, that he doesn't have the plan for victory, or is like, I don't know, just not being loved by the people. That is all true, but he was a very competent, and still is, like, it's not that he's gone, but he still is a very competent battle commander, and his plans made sense, at least for me. So here are the results that were discussed around this offensive, where Ukrainian assault forces were able to liberate quite significant territory and stop Russian offensives around the south, creating like a big danger zone for Russians, that if they would not stop Ukrainian counterattacks, then suddenly they could have massive breach in their front line. Now, a lot of these assault forces now being repurposed and being sent to other areas, such as to the 3rd Assault Corps or the Azov Corps, the 1st Corps. And this is very interesting. So President Zelensky went to different parts of Frontline and met with a lot of the military personnel. He specifically met with two big notable commanders. One is Redis, who is the commander of the Azov Corps, and also Beletsky, who is the commander of the 3rd Assault Corps. It seems that we are transitioning even further into the Corps system, and now with the change of the commander-in-chief, we definitely see more movement towards it, and it's clear that Zelensky is supporting these activities. A lot of the older assault regiments are now being sent towards these specific corps, and now these corps are being given authority of the front line. One of the massive issues that Ukraine had when we're looking at the Eastern front line, that you didn't have like a unified command over a large part of the front line. You could have a corps operating on the big part of the front line, but then there would be like 50 kilometers of the front where it would be some separate brigade that is in control of it. Then after that separate brigade, you would have some units from absolutely different corps just being here for no reason, and then they would have like some another parts of the corps and then another brigade, and you would have this patchwork of different units, and they all report to different commanders, and the communication between themselves was not always the best. Now, Ukrainians made it work nonetheless because they are very capable, but it was sort of like going against the grain. And now with these couple of big corps being assigned parts, massive parts of the front line, and hopefully with the new commander-in-chief also providing resources for these activities, we can see a lot more coherent Ukrainian defense that will be much harder to break, and potentially some local counteroffensive actions. Both the Azov and the third assault brigade, as it was now, the 3rd Army Corps, all of these are coming from very, very aggressive beginnings, so to say. So they know how to fight towards the enemy, not only defend their territory. It's very bad news for Russians, very good news for anyone that is looking for actual changes in Ukrainian military. That truly makes me happy. And before we finish, a final reminder why we are supporting Ukraine. Not because what Ukraine is a country. Now, a lot of people have wrote me and asked me about the criminal scandals, corruption scandals, and so on. And I'm making a video for it. Don't worry about it. But we are supporting Ukraine for what it stands for, the democracy. Like, Ukraine is a new forming democracy. The fact that there are corruption scandals, it means that the corruption is being fought against, because corruption that loves silence, not exposure. It's controversial things, but that's how it is. And Ukraine is what we all want to be, this modern, vibrant democracy where there are movements toward betterment. And more importantly, they are fighting against the Russians, a very aggressive nation, imperial nation in our Europe that is actively targeting us, our forces, our defense capabilities. Russians, once again, are threatening us with more actions on our territory, stating that suddenly our defense enterprises just might spontaneously combust, like they already happened many times over. We saw missiles fly into our territories. The fact that we're not responding is encouraging Russia. The fact that we're not participating fully, we are having internal bickering, internal discussions whether or not we need to support Ukraine. It's not about supporting Ukraine. It's about protecting us by supporting Ukraine. So protect yourself, your family, your friends, support Ukrainian armed forces, trust in Ukraine. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.